My name is Liz Watson. I am the Executive Director of the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center, and this is our weekly series, Dispatch from the Front Lines. On Dispatch from the Front Lines, we hear from people whose lives have been upended by this pandemic, from our movement partners, and we have amazing partners here with us tonight who've been fighting so hard and doing such good work, and from congressional champions who are special guests who have come on the series to talk about the work that they're doing, shaping policy solutions that will help families and help communities all across this nation. For those of you tuning in for the first time, I'm Liz Watson. I run the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. We have folks streaming in one by one, so we want to get everybody centered and ready to be a part of this important conversation. We're a nonprofit organization that works to inform the public about policies that promote justice, equity, and fairness. We work with our grassroots partners, with advocates, with labor unions, with organizers, with researchers and policy experts. And we're so glad to be joined by truly amazing partners here with us tonight. We're grateful to host this special conversation with the We Demand More Coalition. And I'm excited to have MomsRising, Planned Parenthood, UltraViolet, and the National Women's Law Center here with us tonight, and particularly to be joined by our very special guest, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who is a tireless champion for her district and for folks all across the nation, Michigan's 13th and beyond. This was a critical week in our nation's response to the pandemic. There are more than 1.3 million people in the US now with confirmed cases of the coronavirus, and we've seen 83,000 deaths. The coronavirus arrived at the White House this week as several senior staff tested positive and dozens more had to self-isolate. And this is just one day after one of those staffers visited a nursing home with Vice President Pence wearing no protective gear. We are all at risk in this pandemic, but what we know is that the people who are getting the short end of the stick and who have been getting the short end of the stick for a very long time are so much worse off right now. So this includes women working in low-paid jobs, women fighting for access to abortion, women suffering from domestic violence, some of whom are now quarantined with their abusers. And in particular, the weight of women who are providing care are caregivers, and we know that these are far disproportionately women. The weight on them is just extraordinary. The coronavirus pandemic has shown a light on the ways in which we undervalue care in our society. As Ai-jen Poo, the director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, says, care is what connects us all. Care for the sick and dying, care for children who are outside of school, care for our neighbors who are quarantined or doing without. In a pandemic, care work is absolutely vital, and yet it has always been undervalued, and not coincidentally, that work falls largely on women's shoulders. And I think we've always known how essential the work is that women do, but in case you need evidence, women, and especially women of color, are bearing the economic brunt of this pandemic and this economic crisis. And women are 77% of healthcare workers. That is an astounding statistic. 77% of healthcare workers, 90% of childcare workers, and 2/3 of those working in grocery stores, just to name a few of the professions on the front lines today. And at the same time, women also dominate many of the occupations that are being devastated by this crisis, including restaurant workers who face higher levels of poverty, violence, and discrimination. And in addition to this, we know that anti-abortion extremists are using this crisis as cover to declare reproductive health services non-essential and to try to shut down access to abortion. From equal pay to access to basic health services, to the ability of our childcare workers to simply stay afloat. We know that this pandemic is exposing deep inequities in our society that preceded this crisis, but that should not endure. If we don't demand that our responses center equity, we know that we will come out of this crisis even more unequal. And I know that's where none of us want to be. So yesterday, the House released the HEROES Act to provide much needed relief for our state and local governments, essential workers, immigrants, families, students, and our democracy. And however, I think it's really important to say that this bill doesn't go far enough, that there's much more that needs to be done to stop mass layoffs, to protect our childcare workforce, to ensure that we have enough income support for people to actually weather this storm. The House could vote on the HEROES Act as soon as Friday, and then it will go over to the Senate, where Republican leader Mitch McConnell has suggested that companies should be entirely protected from liability when their workers are in danger, and that states should declare bankruptcy rather than getting aid. We have a fight ahead of us, my friends. There's a lot more work to do to make sure everyone has what they need to make it through. And that's why I'm so thrilled tonight to be joined by our special guest, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, and the incredible leaders of the We Demand More Coalition. And I'm thrilled to pass off the mic to my co-host here tonight, Monifa Bandele from MomsRising, to kick us off. Monifa,
thank you so much, Liz. Thank you. And you said it, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're really here again from the We Demand More Coalition, nearly 100 women's organizations strong. And we're here to say that our movement rejects the mythology of scarcity. We recognize that budgets are value statements, and we see where the money's going. And we're also here to say that women are valuable. Our physical, emotional, intellectual labor is essential. Women, including trans women, Black women, brown women, LGBTQ women, AAPI, immigrant women, Muslim women, Jewish women, we demand more. And we know that we have the ability to make sure that every sector of our communities, each and every family, that we have the power and the ability to make sure that there is equity at every level. So please join us, find out more about the We Demand Coalition. We're going to have some of our key leaders speaking later on in the show, but I'm going to turn it back over to Liz so that she can introduce our special guest.
So now I'm thrilled to introduce our special guest, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Representative Tlaib is a progressive warrior from Detroit, Michigan, one of the cities that's been hardest hit by COVID-19. She made history in 2008 by becoming the first Muslim woman to ever serve in the Michigan legislature. And she became one of the 2 first Muslim women elected to Congress in 2018. For years, she's been advocating and fighting for her district, always putting people first. And I will say, from getting to observe the way that you work in Congress, Congresswoman Tlaib, you do this in such a selfless way with so much humility, and it is really beautiful to watch your leadership. It's just, it's something that I really have noticed about you and appreciate. Congresswoman Tlaib is a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Democratic Women's Caucus, and the Pro-Choice Caucus. She's called on Congress to get immediate relief for everyone, especially for women and their families during this crisis, through our Automatic Boost to Communities Act. Her Emergency Water is a Human Right Act, and her Emergency Relief for State, Territorial, and Local Governments Act, and so much more. So first off, thank you so much. I know you're so busy. Thank you for taking the time with us to be here tonight to let folks know about the work that you're leading in Congress. And it would be really helpful, I think, for people to hear also first about what is happening in your district, what you're seeing on the ground, and we'd love to hear how you're doing as well.
No, thank you so much, Liz. I think, for so many of my colleagues, I know for myself, this is a global pandemic, but my district especially was already on survivor mode. I'm the eldest of 14, for many folks that don't know where the warrior part or the mama bear part comes from, but I've been taking care of people all my life. And so one of the things that I see is happening is, again, with frontline communities that have felt really have been impacted the most of what doing nothing looks like, from Congress to all levels of government, around our broken healthcare system, around the economic divide, around just so much concentrated poverty and, continued inequity in education. I mean, all of it. So going from survivor mode to now this pandemic, my neighbors are dying. I don't even want to get emotional. I mean, I see, I grew up in the most beautiful, blackest city in the country. So I know what strength is and resilience. And I'm always reminded by all my mothers on the block and around, really just these incredible mentors, even my high school teacher reminding me that transformative change doesn't happen, in the halls of Congress. It happens because of these coalition warriors that are on this call. It's because we are demanding it from the outside in, and it's going to take us to, again, transform all these structures, again, that has been set up against so many of our neighbors that already been oppressed, and now it's getting worse. But I want people to know and understand, the state of Michigan's population, African-American population, is less than 15%, but 40% of the deaths are African-Americans. That alone tells you there's something obviously broken, but also it just shows the ugly divide of environmental racism, where I represent a community that has some of the worst air quality. So we already have respiratory issues, asthma, and again, to add coronavirus and COVID on top of that, we see so many of my folks that don't have access to healthcare, don't have access to good quality of life because of low wages, being impacted directly. And it's seeing loved ones and seeing your neighbors. Another neighbor of mine lost her son to coronavirus. So it is something that I think, is really profound. And trying to be laser focused on saving lives means being people centered and what that looks like. But, Liz, and for all my coalition warriors out there, I mean, we're fighting for basic rights like access to water, y'all. Like, I don't understand. You understand that I have mothers right now that don't have access to water to make formula for their children. That we even have stories out there that they go door to door to get just a cup just to make formula for their kids, or they reuse the water. If they're cooking with it, they use it later to flush the toilet. I mean, these are things that you don't think are happening right here in the United States of America, a wealthy country. It does. And what's so scary about all of this is before the pandemic, we were fighting for water as a human right because mothers were not reporting their water shut off or seeking help because they were hearing that when they did, Child Protective Services would show up and take their children away from them. So being poor in this country is costing lives, is expensive, is tearing families apart. And so I am so pleased that in this bill, with the help of Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who's been my partner and has never let my tenacity or my determination or my venting stir her away from making sure that this next package does have the $1.5 billion towards getting people water. I can't wait to talk to my neighbors who can say now they can take a bath in their own homes, that they don't have to be feel so ashamed, that we can, again, laser focus saving lives. I know when we show up for each other, we do save lives, and that also means, supporting the Automatic Boost to Communities Act. People say, well, what is that, Rashida? And I tell them all the time, Liz, and to all my coalition partners, this is about putting money in people's pockets. And it's just more than that. When people think about reoccurring payments, they think about, well, that's just kind of a Band-Aid. I said, no, when you invest in people, you're investing in small businesses, you're investing in local communities. Every economist will tell you, when you bail out corporations, my God, they just hoard it. I mean, we just bailed out an airline recently, said, hey, we want to keep people to work, you got to help us out. We did that, and what happened? They laid out a bunch of our neighbors. They laid off all of our workers, right? And so, but I know when we give money to people, they go out there, they bring down their debt, they pay for groceries, they pay for these moratoriums that we have on water shutoffs, on rent, on mortgages, on student loans are obviously needed. But when the moratoriums are gone, they're still going to be due. And this is when we have 30 million of our neighbors on unemployment benefits. So having Automatic Boost to Communities Act means $2,000 per person per month, very aggressive. anybody in the United States. And yes, that means our undocumented immigrant neighbors, many of which their children go to our school with our kids, are an integral part of our communities and neighborhoods, but for the broken immigration system, they don't have status, right? And so they are, to me, victims of what doing nothing politics looks like around broken systems. And so this is during the pandemic, they would get to $2,000. And then understandably, right, an economist that we talked to and when we put this proposal together said, look, even after the pandemic, the impact will still be there. So it would be $1,000 a month for many of our neighbors. And Liz, and for all of you, people laugh at me when I say I want to do it on debit cards, but they don't understand what it means to be unbanked. They don't understand the fact that so many of our folks are still disconnected and so many women are underbanked. And so the debit cards is a way, and again, the idea came because we do it with food assistance now, right? We have food assistance on the bridge cards, they get them, are able to do it. And it really does help. And now I see, this whole movement around, let's get, instead of these paper checks, let's get debit cards out to people. And that way we can work with our homeless community and neighbors that work on the ground, get these cards out to people. Again, we've done it for national disasters in the past. FEMA has done these cash cards and these other things in the past. Again, though, the global pandemic, something that we've never, in our lifetime will experience, hopefully ever again, we're going to continue to experience this, is that we have to really just make sure that the most vulnerable are never left behind, because when we do, we're going to lose them. And I mean, those are the main things that I've really been working on, and I can talk more about local governments, but if we're going to talk about really impacting women in our country and helping our most vulnerable, it is really those kinds of direct aid that's critically important. No amount of corporate bailout is going to help us women. What is going to happen is true investment in us, which means direct aid to us as individuals, as human beings, that will also help our families and our communities.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I also just want to shout out from another epicenter. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and your work and your passion and all of the amazing advocacy that you do, we see it here. And I feel like Michigan and New York are similar in so many ways, in that there's these other epicenters. You talked about a water crisis on top of this pandemic. And I also work on Black maternal health, which has been a huge crisis also before this pandemic. And so there are a lot of things that are coming up in this package, hopefully, that both address the current pandemic and, address things that were in place before so that we can build back better. So you talked some about the direct assistance to families that came through the CARES Act, and of course that the bill left out millions of families, including immigrant families, college students, and more. Well, yesterday, House leadership released the HEROES Act, a new package of coronavirus relief. Can you talk to us about the HEROES Act and what you're focusing on right now?
So we did have one accomplishment that was a priority for my district, which is water as a human right. So $1.5 billion is in there, and that's fantastic. We have to watch the implementation. That's really key here, especially for us communities of color. I'm telling you, it's the way they put it on the ground that really makes the difference. But the reoccurring payments is not in there. It's one time again. And these Band-Aids are not going to work. People need certainty. Again, we do it for banks all the time. We bail them out. We don't even get any certainty for them. We do it so much for these large, big corporations. You see, the billionaires actually got richer and more wealthier during the pandemic, while our communities are getting more poor and more sicker. And so in there, though, is the specific thing around water in a one-time payment. I also know, and then again, it's really important, as we all know, FEMA is really the lead organization or department that is touching our local governments. So right now, if we have our counties and our local communities, like the city of Brooklyn, Monifa, if they're getting, PPEs, protection gear, if they're doing public, maybe mobile testing, right now they only get reimbursed for that by 75%. And we're pushing to say, look, the federal government needs to do more and reimburse them at 100%. So that's in there. And again, these are all great resources that are in there. one of the key things, though, is as we talk about, moving forward with all of this, is what will happen in the Senate. And, as these various really, I think, transformative kind of investments are in there, it is going to make a huge difference on how the Senate decides whether or not to push forward. Is water a human right to the senators? Is, reimbursement for local communities that, I talked about our neighbors living check by check and they're already in survivor mode. Many of our local governments were already in survivor mode, right? They could not afford a pandemic. And so they could go bankrupt. And those that are saying that's cool and that's fine with them don't understand what that really means for us as human beings in these communities. It's not just about city services. My God, these are the ones that have to call, you have to call to save lives. These are the folks that are doing the testing and tracing. These are the folks that, touch the lives of our residents more than the federal government ever can. And so we need to be able to make sure that they're protected. One thing to push back, and this is just to uplift, a lot of my Black neighbors constantly remind me, we're so tired of being studied. You talk about Black maternal health, you talk about what's happening, is that they want direct aid and uplifting and investment. What you hear so much about is, well, let's study it. Let's have a task force. Why are African Americans getting tested more positive for COVID? Why are they dying at a higher rate in all communities? The answers are, we already know the answers. And I really believe that. And I believe there's already a true economic divide in our country. We see the kind of approach of getting denied testing if you're Black. I mean, it's really happening in some of our hospital institutions. Like, how do we really push back against that? And so I still worry about that all being missing from there. We can carve out, but what are we really carve out for, like, investment in some of the hardest hit places? But what are we truly doing to making sure that, again, these are the communities that have not been invested in for decades. And during a global pandemic, what are we really doing to help save their lives? And again, I say this because, I continue to hear people mentioning what the impact is on our brown and Black communities, but I don't see enough people saying, well, what are the next steps? I just keep hearing task force and let's study it, let's look into it. And I think, again, so many of my neighbors in Detroit say, but how many times you got to study it? We already know what's happening. So I just want to center us a little bit on that and be, very true. I always want to speak truth, be truthful about that. 1 of 4 of Detroiters are essential workers. They're the ones making sure groceries are on people's table. They're at the front lines. And we still don't have testing for our frontline workers. I mean, we still don't have the kind of things that I think are really essential in this bill.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that, because that is exactly what we hear also from our members all the time, is that, we're tired of the studies, we're tired of the research, one, we want action, and also we need to hear real stories from people. And so one of the things we do all the time is to go out there and hear from everyday people and how these issues are impacting them. And something that we touched on is childcare. And childcare is one of those things where there really just is not enough in the proposal to keep our infrastructure going for the long term, so that when people are able to go back to their lives, they'll have the childcare that they need. And so I want to introduce one of our storytellers to just talk about how not just childcare, but all of these issues intersect with each other. No one's experiencing one thing in isolation. And we're really grateful that she's able to join us. And so we have Molly here. Molly is the mom of a 4-year-old living in Henderson, Nevada. And she and her partner lost their income due to the pandemic and have struggled to access financial assistance. Both she and her family also face health challenges that leave them at higher risk for the coronavirus. Molly, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Can you tell us what you and your family have been facing since this pandemic began?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Molly Lynch, like you mentioned. I'm from Henderson, Nevada. I've been a member of MomsRising for quite some time. This pandemic has really affected my family in multiple ways. For instance, we both were working when this started. We have a 4-year-old, and she is in a program that's a magnet school, but it's provided through low income. So we were already living paycheck to paycheck, basically, and we decided to try for another baby, and we got pregnant, and then the pandemic happened the very next month. With her being home from school, and me being at high risk, I have, in the last 2 years, my lungs have collapsed twice. And we also my mother lives with us, and I'm taking care of her full time, and she's on oxygen. So she's at high risk also. So to have my partner, Augustus, go out and work it's a catch-22, you know. He applied for 23 jobs yesterday, 23. And not only that, he's been unable to successfully get a hold of unemployment. He coughed once at work in February, and they told him to take a week off, and then they put him on furlough, and then they just called last week and told him that he's not eligible to come back to work. So not only are we facing that, but we can't get any unemployment. And we filed our taxes in February, and then March came, and because we're not married, I don't qualify for the stimulus check. Although I was working and he files me as a dependent, I'm not 17 or under, so I don't qualify for a stimulus check. And it's not, $1,200 is really nice, you know, $1,200 plus the $500 for a child. It's really nice, but it's not enough. We have our landlord coming and threatening us to evict us the day that the pandemic is over, which, what is to say that he can't do that? There's nothing in place that he's saying he can't do that as soon as it's over. And we're not able to pay our rent right now. We're not able to, you know, there's certain things that come before others. And here in Nevada, we've slowly started opening certain things. And I'm terrified that there's going to be a second wave, and I'm going to have to deliver my baby during a second wave of the pandemic. And like I said, you know, meanwhile, we can't get any kind of unemployment. Like I said, we can't get any kind of assistance. We're just kind of sitting ducks waiting for some kind of help, and we're not able to pay bills, but we're also being threatened for not paying them. And you know, when I am able to go back to work, if I am able to, there's not going to be childcare, because our childcare program is through the school district, which only takes place during the school year. So there's no help for us during the summertime as things are slowly starting to reopen. Should we go back to work? We have bills to pay. It's hard to stress and prioritize which should be more important, our car insurance or our, food. Like, we need to eat, and I'm growing a child, and my daughter's 4, and I'm struggling, teaching her from home. She's bored out of her mind. But we're just, my biggest concern, is health. We need additional financial assistance to weather the crisis and get back on our feet. We need to know when and what we do when we do return to work. We'll have access to basic protection like paid family and medical leave, paid sick days. We need essential support like affordable, safe childcare. I hope Congress will prioritize the health and economic security of working families like mine. Thank you so much.
Molly, for sharing your story. Representative Tlaib?
Just what an incredible, I mean, if there was any moment that we needed some sort of inspiration or to understand fully what a global pandemic impact would look like, I mean, this is exactly these kinds of power stories. I just thank you so much, Molly, for sharing, because I know how vulnerable it is to share what is happening to your family and the challenge that you all are facing. That's why when I say Automatic Boost to Communities Act, people get excited like you because it's $2,000 every month during the pandemic. So there's a certainty, like while we're still fighting this to save lives, that you're going to have the federal government which is your money. Like I keep telling people, this is your money going back to you, to making sure that you can help protect yourself and provide for your family. It is so, that's why ABC Act is really highly popular among, I think, women. I mean, you saw that there was polling done where it showed, bipartisan support outside of Congress. There is bipartisan support for reoccurring payments of $2,000 a month for every individual, and to continue that investment after the pandemic. It is really critically important. It's not, when I talk to people, it's a third of folks across the country couldn't pay their rent in April. I don't even know what it is in May. I think 25% of folks that have mortgages had to seek out some sort of forbearance at this point. All of that is going to be due. All of that is stress on the family. All of that is if anything, just is reaffirming the importance of something like the Automatic Boost to Communities Act. Molly, it would be life-changing for you to have that come in. I know it would. When I tell people, they get like, wait, what? Really? This is wonderful. And other countries are doing it. So, Monifa, they constantly tell us, well, this is not the time, wait. Every time we wait, we lose people. I mean, we lose people to this. And so it is really important that we push back against this gaslighting that this is not the time. I'm not sure when is the time. We have a pandemic and no cure for it. And people are dying at a high rate in communities like Molly's and like mine. So again, ABC Act is critical here, and we need to really be able to push back against those that say it's not time.
Thank you so much. And Representative Tlaib, I really want to thank you for centering race in this discussion. I really think that is so critical, and talking about what is happening on the ground and how we've got to act. I had to hold myself because I just recently lost an aunt 2.5 weeks ago in Texas, who was sick, who was tested at a hospital, but then sent home, and she died at home. And so when I hear the story similar to hers, and hearing everything that you said about access to testing, being turned down for testing, is so critically important. And I just wanted to take a pause to just thank you for uplifting that, because it's, heavy on my heart. And I know that this is at the root of the maternal health crisis, so we're not surprised with what's happening in the pandemic. But we are hopeful when we have champions like you who are not afraid to center race. So I'll hand it over to Liz to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Monifa. And I want to say a special thanks to Molly for so poignantly sharing your story. And I think, one of the things that you're pointing out here that we really need to lift up is that for a lot of families in America, and many folks have already said this, but things were bad before this crisis, right? And the broken economy, as the congressman said, and our broken healthcare system, and frankly, our broken childcare system, make a bad situation so much worse. And we have to figure out, as the Congresswoman just said, how it is that we build back better and how it is that we make sure that the relief being provided now reaches every single one of us. And I think that's really, you know, the North Star that needs to be there in any relief packages that are passed now. And frankly, there's a lot of work that's going to have to be done well into the future. And I think we really can. This is a time when we just have to, you know, it's a reckoning, right, of the inequality that is rampant in our nation, and it's a time of reckoning, and it's a time of opportunity to change. So, on that note, I am thrilled to introduce leaders of the We Demand More coalition, and we have outstanding folks here with us tonight to talk about the work that the We Demand More coalition is leading and what you are fighting for in this moment of crisis for our nation. I am thrilled to introduce Amy Matsui, the Director of Income Security and Senior Counsel at the National Women's Law Center. I am a longtime fan of Amy Matsui's work, and her former colleague used to have the pleasure of working down the hall from her. So Amy, we're thrilled to have you with us tonight. Thank you for the work that you've been leading, particularly on behalf of women and particularly low-income women and women of color for so many years. Shaunna Thomas, the co-founder and executive director of UltraViolet, an amazing fighter for reproductive freedom. Shaunna is also a board member, actually, of ours, so we're thrilled to have you join us. Shaunna, thank you for all the work that you do. So we know that women and families, and my first question, Amy, is going to go to you. We know that women and families have been hit very hard by the coronavirus, and we just heard from Molly about you know, the incredible pain and suffering this has inflicted on her family, and that's shared by women, and particularly women of color across this country. And we know that how hard hit Latinx communities are. We know how hard hit Native American communities are, how hard hit African American communities and so many other communities of color. At the same time, we're seeing women's needs not being fully addressed in many of the measures in the relief packages thus far. And I think it would be really helpful to hear from you, Amy, the way in which persistent gender inequality is playing out in this moment, and what we can do to build back better.
Thank you so much, Liz. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you and with kind of our, my co-patriots in this struggle who are part of the We Demand More coalition. So just as folks were saying and kind of rendered so true, women are really getting disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus, and that's showing up especially in communities of color. So many women workers struggling to support their families were not surviving well paycheck to paycheck even before the pandemic. And the part of that's because women are so much more likely than men to be in part-time work or in low-paid jobs or tipped wages, the retail and restaurant and service sector jobs, which have been so at risk in the pandemic as doors have been closing and these small businesses have been shuttered communities. And we saw in the April jobs report that was released last week that women suffered the majority of job losses last month. So women now have higher unemployment rate than men, and especially for women of color, women with disabilities, and younger women, those are groups of women who have even higher unemployment rates. And so at the same time, women are also overrepresented in the frontline workers who are risking their lives really to provide healthcare and childcare and the other essential services that we all need to move forward and survive. But they're being asked to perform that work without personal protective equipment or without workplace protections and without childcare. So at the same time, at home, as everyone on the call has been pointing out, women are also shouldering the lion's share of caregiving at home. They're caring for people who are sick, for children when their schools and daycares are being closed. But what this incredible pressure is putting on women is the vulnerability and the strain and the stress that so many of you have spoken to beautifully. The bottom line is that COVID-19 crisis is exacerbating the longstanding gender and racial inequities in healthcare and in our economy. And that's why it's so critically important that the relief needs to center women and families.
Thank you so much, Amy. And the National Women's Law Center and UltraViolet, along with MomsRising and many other organizations, created the We Demand More Coalition to ensure that the needs of women and families are met in this package. So what are you specifically looking for in the next response package?
So we're looking for a number of things, and I think what we're looking for really is the outcome and kind of how these different policies and priorities manifest in people's lives. We really want to see a difference in how people are experiencing not only the coronavirus, but also kind of the economy and healthcare as we come out of it. So first and foremost, any response package has to prioritize our health and safety ahead of corporations. Women, including trans women and families, and most especially our immigrant families, deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Policymakers and business leaders need to put our needs and interests ahead of those of corporations. They're getting the bailouts and women are not. We need comprehensive and affordable health care, paid sick time, paid family and medical leave without gaping holes that leave people out, and personal protective equipment for all of the healthcare providers and essential workers. In addition, like workers who are out there right now working need to have occupational safety and health standards and so much more. Second, the package needs to get life-sustaining relief to us now. We need to provide the kinds of income supports that Representative Tlaib spoke about, and income to essential workers, women-owned small businesses, and people struggling at home to pay the bills and make ends meet. And we need to release vulnerable folks in jails, prisons, and detention centers who do not pose a public safety risk. And then last but not least, I want to highlight that the next package needs to make state governments strong because they're our lifelines. We need to stabilize the state and local governments. 60% of their workers are women and over 22% are women of color. The jobs they support to help make sure that everyone has the tools for health coverage, education, and essential services like those that domestic violence survivors need for programs and shelters. And as Liz and other folks mentioned, we desperately need help for the childcare sector. It's a critical part of our economy. And without robust support, we are not going to have that system working for us on the other side of the pandemic. I want to turn it over to Shaunna to kind of pick up some of the other needs that the relief packages need to serve.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. There's two more. I'm so grateful to be here and to be a part of this conversation and this coalition from UltraViolet's perspective. So one of the first things that we saw and was unfortunately predictable is that when in any crisis, it seems that there's a sect of the right wing that likes to use it to punish women. And one of the things, one of the ways that they do it is try and is use a crisis, leverage a crisis to make it harder for women to get access to reproductive health services, including abortion, but not just limited to abortion. So it's a major priority for us that we see, that we engage every ally on this that we can, including those in Congress, to stop the attacks on our reproductive health care, which, to be clear, is essential health care. There is a role for both federal and state governments to be making it easier, not harder, to access essential health care in our country and around the world. Some of those steps that we'd like to see taking or recognizing, elected officials sort of recognizing, right, that reproductive health care, including contraception and abortion, is essential health care, and taking really affirmative steps to protect that access, which includes things like comprehensive funding for reproductive health care and supporting the healthcare providers who deliver it. There's legislation we could be passing, like the Women's Health Protection Act, eliminating restrictions on insurance, coverage of abortion, passing the Each Woman Act, protecting doctors and other healthcare workers from discrimination because of the healthcare they provide, unfortunately, and passing the Global Health Empowerment and Rights Act, and finally restoring funding to a number of proposals. So that's the third priority. And then the fourth is that any policy response needs to protect our safety and our right to vote in 2020. It's crucial for every single person in this country. No one should have to choose between their right to vote and their health. We need robust funding and policies that are going to allow people to vote safely and securely, including implementing vote by mail, expanding early voting, expanding voter registration options, making sure that polling locations are safe, and all of the adjustments that are going to have to go into making that the case. And then the voter education that's going to need to happen to ensure people know how and where and when they can vote.
Thank you so much, especially for uplifting this attack on our reproductive health care. It is insidious and enraging. And thank you so much, Amy, for including our incarcerated women who are in jails, our prisons and detention centers, who often get forgotten about, but we will not be leaving them behind in our coalition. We have a question. We have some questions from the live stream, and I'm going to throw in this first question. It's from Layla in Detroit. Oh, Representative Tlaib, your people are in the house.
I hope it's not my sister. My sister's name is Layla. I hope it better not be.
I wonder if it's.
I know. Well, she's very much an activist. She's counsels survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, so she's very in tune. I wouldn't be surprised. But
okay, well,
she has my cell phone, so hopefully.
This is a question on immigration and reproductive. Well, let me read it. While we're all in survival mode in the coronavirus crisis, we are seeing rollbacks of protections from the EPA, attacks on immigrants, and as of course, Shaunna outlined, new restrictions on our reproductive rights and more. How do we protect ourselves from what's happening with our attention while our attention is on this pandemic?
No, it is scary. I want you all to know, like within 1 week of, and this is early on, within 1 week, all of a sudden the Trump administration had sent out a release saying that they're going to pull back on any enforcement, EPA to enforce any of our Clean Air Act or Clean Water Act provisions. A lot of people don't realize that was right under the radar. So Representative Levin and myself sent a letter, many of our colleagues supported, to saying to push back against that. Honestly, I don't believe it was a capacity issue, y'all. It's not, a lot of decisions have to be made based on, as folks talked about, based on our health and safety. I don't know what is more critical than clean water and clean air at this point. So I'm so appreciative, Layla, thinking about that and being centered on that. But absolutely, our environmental justice partners need to be aware of it. And I know many of them are speaking up, but it's hard during this pandemic with every little tweet and every little comment is being overwhelmed, being very much draining a lot of some of these really, I think, deadly decisions being done by the Trump administration right now, as well as, the exclusion of our immigrant neighbors. This is not to say there's all these different levels, but so many already contribute to our communities. Many own small businesses. I mean, it's like we're all in denial that they pay tax. Many of them are already part of our country, that they continue to be excluded. But worst off, today I had to call St. Clair County Jail in Michigan, where there's 35 ICE detainees, all because women are calling my office saying, my husband has been there for 2 months, he has COVID, and she doesn't know what to do. And one of the things that they're doing there is, although they're testing for COVID, they're just putting people 14 days in quarantine, but they're not retesting them before they put them in a population of 205. So there's a lot of that going on that's under the radar. I sit on House Oversight Committee, and I want you to know, Layla, like, I use the power of my letterhead. I've sent requests into ICE demanding information, but I do believe, ACLU Michigan is very involved right now. I'm not going to just wait until Congress acts or for the current administration to be less lawless. I am very much trying to work with our community partners to push back against this and filing necessary lawsuits or injunctions on some of these inhumane actions by this administration. But it is hard, I think, for many of us. We care so much. Women, we tend to have this unique lens, and so incredibly important in all different levels of government, but also in different kind of justice work. Like, if we can think about these things, I wish many of our male counterparts that seem to be in a lot of these power positions could do the same.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And we know that these are the things that you've been fighting for before this pandemic. And so it's going to definitely be a marathon. So we really thank you. Another question we have is from Sandy in Atlanta. And we get this a lot from our members and all of our partners in Georgia. And she's asking, Representative, I live in Atlanta, and despite warnings from public health officials, Governor Kemp is opening up our state. I work at a child care center that is closed now, but if it opens back up, I'm going to have to go to work, even if I don't think it's safe, because I have to pay my bills. When our representatives are willing to put businesses and their own political interests before our safety, what can we do to protect ourselves?
I speaking truth. You can share this with us, but we already know. But boy, you need to be out there sharing it. Not only, it's not just about, when I talk about that street, kind of organizing, I'm talking about working your block, getting organized with other daycare workers that are saying, we can't jeopardize the lives of the kids that we have to take care of, but our own lives. I want you to know, some of these folks that are making decisions are not even having town halls. They won't risk their own lives and getting out there. And I said, until one of you all stop doing this virtual stuff and go out there and shake hands at these town halls and not wear masks, will I say, yeah, to my neighbors that work at daycares or work at grocery stores that, yeah, it's safe to be out there. We need to push back against a lot of, I think, this idea around listening to Chamber of Commerce and these folks that get to stay home and make money off of our oppression, make money off of our pain and our lives right now, and really focus on what the experts are saying. They need to stop quoting themselves and coming up with these theories out of the wall and actually look at the numbers. 1.3 million folks, worse than any other, have COVID right now. We don't know, there's different strands of it. There's all this stuff going on with testing that needs to be developed. We need to push back. And what you can do is, look, it's easier for me to say this to you, and you're in Atlanta, but if you feel so unsafe to go to work, don't go. That's all I keep saying to because I don't want to say to y'all like this is, but it's so hard to say this to y'all because I know this is your survival, but God, I just don't want you to go to work where you feel that unsafe and that you can't be able to provide for your family in that way. It's almost like, for me, my dad was a UAW person, like organized workers get together and say whatever you want, but you're not going to force me to put my life on the line. We're going to push back. We're going to organize. And we're going to say the doctors and the scientists and everybody say staying home saves lives. So we're going to really center around that and continue to speak that truth.
Monifa, do you want to ask our next question?
Oh, I thought you were introducing.
Oh, we have one more question that just came in from the chat. Let me see if I can find it. So this question is from Sandy in Atlanta. Congresswoman Tlaib, I live in Atlanta. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. No, we just asked that question. I apologize. Sorry. Okay. Well, I want to say a special thanks to Congresswoman Tlaib for just the heroic work that you're doing in very difficult circumstances, and also just being real with people about, you know, the costs and the tough decisions that people have to make right now, you know, between their paychecks and their jobs, and nobody should have to make those choices, right? And we know that we can do better than this, and I know you're fighting for better, and so I want to thank you for being in the fight. We know you have a lot of work to do this week with the upcoming vote in the House on HEROES Act, and just, you know, want to say may all the strength be with you, and thank you, and thanks not only for fighting for your district, but for every single one of us. We're going to let you, I know you have a crazy schedule, so we're going to let you hop off the call, but we'd like to keep the rest of our listeners here with us because we have some exciting announcements about next steps that can be taken in our next call. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Tlaib, for being here with us tonight.
I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for giving credibility to everything that we're fighting for. Many of my colleagues that are staying rooted in community and hear you all. Please know that we are really in belief of everything, Molly and Cindy, all the questions. We believe you that this is what's going on, and I don't want you to ever think that there's not members of Congress that are not connected to that pain. So thank you all so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Congresswoman.
Thank you.
And now I would like to turn to Shaunna Thomas and to Brianna Twofoot, who is the National Organizing Director with Planned Parenthood Action Fund. And I'd like to ask the two of you to talk about, so what are some steps that folks here on the call can take who are concerned about their families, their friends and neighbors, their communities, and the nation? What are some things that folks can do?
Thanks, Liz. I'll go ahead and start. If you didn't come into this conversation convinced that there is far more we need to do for our communities and our families, you certainly are now. And this moment right now is critical. In the coming weeks, We Demand More as a coalition is mobilizing our collective organized power in communities to remind Congress that it is our folks, our communities, and in particular women, trans women, women of color, and girls need more in the next COVID relief package than they've gotten in the previous, a lot more. And we've identified what many of those things are, and we will be bringing back to our audiences, our community members, details about the ways in which Congress is going to be meeting those needs over the next few weeks. Since we can't rally in the streets these days in a way that's safe, it's important that we, are moving how we demonstrate power and demonstrate our collective voice and commitments to an online digital space. And there are therefore a few ways you can get involved really easily from your home. The first is that We Demand More has a petition, and we are looking to show as much support as possible for our 5 demands through signatures. We're sharing that petition, I think, right now on your screen, and it will and petition signatures will be shared with all of the decision makers who are making decisions at all levels of government, from whom we need them to move new legislation and move resources to make sure our communities are served. So when you sign the petition at wedemandmore.org, you will be able to access information on additional ways that you are able to support moving forward and showing the power of the community behind the We Demand More priorities. Another opportunity that's coming up in next week as Congress considers the HEROES bill, the COVID relief package, is we we are going to need to communicate to Congress directly that our communities still need relief and that they must continue to provide relief and do a better job, right, of centering women and girls as they do it. On Tuesday, May 19th, We Demand More is organizing a national call-in day where supporters of our organizations and the We Demand More coalition can call their members of Congress and let them know that we demand more and that we demand as much as they can possibly do right now to serve our communities as we've defined them. And there are a few other things that you can do, and I'm going to hand it over to Brianna to tell you about what those are.
Thanks, Shaunna. Super excited to be working with you and others on the phone in this coalition. And one of the great things about a coalition is it brings together many organizations, all of which were leading great work before we all started hanging out together. So in addition to the coalition events Shaunna mentioned, I'll lift up a few additional ways you can get involved. And I think get ready because there's about to be some more links popping into the chat. So Monifa, our amazing host, works at MomsRising, an amazing organization. And one of the things they do that is so important is collect stories from women and moms who want to share their COVID-related experiences and other experiences. Molly, thank you again for sharing. I know it is so important for folks to hear about experiences across the country from folks who are similar to us, different from us in different circumstances, et cetera, so that we can really take a collective view on the moment we're in. So please connect with MomsRising if you have a story to share, in calls like the one tonight. A second thing, Women's March, one of the organizations that is part of the We Demand More coalition, is making protest masks to both spread knowledge about the importance of masks in this moment and support folks to show solidarity with We Demand More and Women's March and the priorities we stand for. So you can go to Women's March's website, and I think we're dropping in the link to sign up and make a protest mask. That's another way you can also sign up to stay informed about opportunities that will unfold in the coming weeks. And then Planned Parenthood Action Fund, where I work, is running a virtual volunteer program. So every Wednesday night, actually, I'm going to hop off of this call onto that call in a half hour. Every Wednesday night, you can participate in a training that supports you to take virtual action to protect women's reproductive health care and take action with the We Demand More coalition. So tonight we've got about 100 folks coming in who will send out texts through an app, a new app called Outvote that we have, asking folks to sign the petition, which I think will be important as we bring that demonstration of power to others. And finally, the last thing, vote. So as COVID impacts our democratic process, make sure you're ready and you give yourself lots of lead time to figure out what's going on in your state. When is the next opportunity to vote? How is it going to happen? Are there any changes to how you typically do it? And if you're curious, you can go to vote.org to find out that information for yourself. You can register there. You can set up to vote by mail. Just be ahead of it. It's a really critical year, and I think this pandemic has highlighted it even more, how important it is that we elect leaders who will serve our communities well.
Thank you so much, Brianna. And I want to say a special thanks, and then after that, I'll turn it over to Monifa to close us out. Special thanks to all of our panelists who were here with us tonight, to Shaunna Thomas, Brianna Twofoot, my wonderful co-host, Monifa, Bandele, Molly, Lynch. Molly, you are an amazing activist, and I think really crystallized for everyone why we all have to keep fighting. Amy, Matsui, thank you all for being here, to my fellow panelists, and really shining a light on what we need to be fighting for, and how it is that we are going to address the persistent gender inequities that we carried with us into this crisis, and how we make sure we don't carry them out. So I want to do a plug, as some colleagues have asked me to do, and say a shout out to my colleagues at the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center who put this on, Jessica Juarez Scruggs, Famala Pongsaba, Hiba Kassam. Thank you for your good work. And I want to just let you know that we do have our next Zoom session, Dispatch from the Front Lines, coming up on May 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And that dispatch will be in conjunction with the Native Organizers Alliance. It's a teletown hall on how COVID-19 is affecting tribal nations and indigenous people in the US. And we are very excited to be hosting some very special guests, including Congresswoman Deb Haaland, North Dakota State Representative Ruth Buffalo, and Faith Spotted Eagle. So I know that inside of the chat, you have a link to sign up, and I hope you will all join us. I think it is really important that we make sure that we are centering the needs of communities in this nation who have historically been marginalized, because we know that marginalization is occurring in the coronavirus relief packages as they're being put together, and we can't let that happen. So the way that we can all work together is to really bring communities front and center who may otherwise be pushed to the side. So thank you all for joining in this really important conversation. Thanks for bringing your smarts to the table. Thanks to our audience who's with us here tonight for all the good work that you are doing and for making your voices heard. We are going to get through this, and we're going to get through it together, and we're going to come out stronger on the other side. So I want to turn to Monifa Bandele, my wonderful co-host from MomsRising, just a totally excellent organization, to close us out.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center. I mean, we really enjoy this. We hope you'll have us again as a co-host. I just want to echo what Representative Tlaib said, which is that stories are powerful. And I know often many of you who join the call put stuff in the chat box, who got on the air to ask a question. What can I do? When you raise your voice and tell your story, you're taking action. If that were not the case, there would not be so many attempts to silence you. So understand that that is the power that we all have, which is to tell our stories. And of course, we must tell stories of people who can't for whatever circumstances. And then I just finally want to end the way I started, which is that we must reject the scarcity paradigm. You know, it's a mindset that has us confined to saying that we have to pick one thing or the other. And when we heard Molly's story, man, there were like so many intersecting issues there. And we know that we can cover all of them. And these relief packages and the budgets that come out on every level of government are a value statement. And with our stories, we're pushing back and we're saying, no, we are valuable. The people are valuable. The families are valuable. Corporations will survive and we won't. And we're essential. So reject scarcity, demand more, feel the power in that, and definitely share your story. Take action. And I love that Shaunna ended with that call to vote, because ultimately we have to make some shifts. Thanks, everybody.